They hunted mammoths. They made tools from stone. Their brains were just as large as ours. In strength, they matched us. In endurance, they may have surpassed us. For tens of thousands of years, Neanderthals thrived across Ice Age. Europe were resilient, intelligent, adapted. And yet, they vanished. We remained. What truly made the difference? Not muscle, not fire, but something far more fragile, the voice. Hidden deep in the throat, shaped by the descent of the larynx, our ability to form complex sounds language may have been the key. Not just to communication, but to memory, strategy, story, and legacy. This isn't just a tale of survival. It's the story of sound becoming thought, and thought becoming destiny. A species once stood beside us, but we were the ones who could speak the future into existence. Some 300,000 years ago, in the wind-scoured lands of Ice Age Europe, a new kind of human emerged, the Neanderthals. Thick-boned, broad-chested, and cold-adapted, they carved out a life against the elements. 100,000 years later, far to the south in Africa, another branch of the human story appeared, Homo Sapiens. Leaner, more lightly built, but equally intelligent, they too made fire, crafted tools, hunted game, and buried their dead. At first glance, the two species were astonishingly alike. Both walked upright. Both shared large cranial capacities brains, nearly identical in size. They wielded stone tools, used pigments, and left marks of intention in the archaeological record. They were, quite literally, cousins. And yet, only one would survive. The other would vanish into silence and dust. It wasn't strength that decided their fate, nor intellect alone. It was something subtler. Something just beginning to stir in the lungs and rise from the throata force that would shape the future. Language. The difference wasn't just in form. It was in the power to share thought and to remember. The world of the Neanderthals was a world of ice and fire, of howling winds, roaring hearths, and the quiet patience of survival. For over 200,000 years, they endured the frozen vastness of glacial Europe. They hunted bison, reindeer, and mammoths with stone-tipped spears, their hands hardened by cold and toil. Beneath the earth, in deep cave systems and rock shelters, they found refuge. Their homes were shaped by necessity, but also by knowledge. Sites like the Réau excavation in southwestern France reveal a people deeply attuned to the materials around them. They understood stone not only how to shape it, but how to use it with precision. Bones weren't just remains. They were tools, weapons, and perhaps even tokens. Far from being brutes, Neanderthals were engineers of survival, tactical, resilient, and profoundly resourceful. And in some caves, archaeologists have found something even more haunting: graves. Carefully arranged bones. Red ochre. A gesture not just of disposal, but of reverence. In those burials, echoes of fragile truth that Neanderthals may have remembered, may have mourned, that even in a world of frost and fang, meaning flickered like firelight on stone. At first glance, the skulls of Neanderthals and modern humans seem remarkably similar, both large-brained, both clearly intelligent. But hidden in the architecture of bone lies a subtle, game-changing distinction. Dr. Jeffrey Lateman, an anatomist studying the base of the skull, discovered that while Neanderthals had a flat cranial base, Homo sapiens had a curved, rounded one. And in that curve, a secret was kept that would shape the destiny of our species. This small anatomical difference affected the position of the larynx, or voice box. In Neanderthals, it remained high in the throat, limiting the range of vocalization. In modern humans, it descended, creating a longer vocal tractor-resonant chamber for complex sound. That change came at a cost. It made choking more likely and breathing while swallowing more difficult. But it gave us something extraordinary in return. Articulate speech. The ability to form rich vowels, subtle tones, and rapid-fire sounds that could carry meaning, memory, and intention. It wasn't brute force that separated us. It wasn't brain size or fire. It was this delicate edge, the reshaped throat, the deepened voice that gave birth to language. And with language, we gained the power to imagine, to strategize, to bind together. Speech wasn't just sound, it was survival. At birth, the human throat resembles that of other mammals. The larynx, or voice box, sits high in the throat close to the nasal passage, allowing infants to breathe and swallow at the same time, just like apes. It's a configuration optimized for safety and survival. But as we grow, something extraordinary and dangerous happens. The larynx begins to descend. This descent is an evolutionary gamble. When the voice box lowers, the airway and the foodway intersect. It's why we can choke on our food, why a single misswallow can become fatal. No other animal takes this risk. But nature made a trade. What we lost in safety, we gained in resonance, the ability to produce a wide range of vocal sounds, from the softest whisper to the soaring vowel. This fragile reconfiguration of the throat created a vocal chamber unlike anything in the animal kingdom. It allowed for articulate speech, for modulation, rhythm, and tone. It made language not just possible but powerful. And with language came culture, strategy, and memory that could outlive the body. In that delicate descent of the larynx, evolution placed a bet. That meaning would matter more than safety. And in doing so, it set humanity on a path no other species would follow. The Neanderthals were no strangers to intelligence. They hunted in groups, crafted tools, and even cared for their wounded. But when it came to sound true, articulate sound, they faced a limit their anatomy could not overcome. Their vocal tract was shorter and their larynx positioned higher. As a result, they likely couldn't produce the full range of vowel sounds that shape human language today. No clear ah, no resonant e, no precise modulation between tones. They may have grunted, gestured, or used pitch and rhythm in basic ways. Perhaps they communicated immediate needs: danger, food, fire. But language isn't just about survival in the moment. It's about imagining what doesn't yet exist, about binding a tribe through shared memory and future plans. Without finely tuned sounds, abstract ideas remain trapped inside the skull, unable to move from one mind to another. This was more than a biological barrier. It was a social wall. Because with language comes the ability to coordinate, to form hierarchies, to teach, to ritualize, and to pass on symbolic meaning that survives beyond a single lifetime. In the silence between Neanderthal sounds, a void remained done that only fully articulate speech could fill. And in that space, Homo sapiens began to rise. Hidden deep within the double helix of our DNA lies a quiet architect of speech, FOXP2, often called the language gene. While no single gene can explain the richness of human communication, this one stands out like a keystone at the center of an evolutionary arch. Discovered by researchers Simon Fisher and Cecilia Lai, FOXP2 governs the development of neural circuits responsible for motor control, learning, and vocalization, the foundational wiring that lets us speak, listen, and understand. What makes FOXP2 so significant is its recent mutation occurring sometime in the last 200,000 years, just as Homo sapiens were emerging. This mutation may have enhanced cognitive flexibility, fine motor control of the lips and tongue, and the brain's ability to associate sound with meaning. It may have allowed us to not just mimic but create, refine, and transmit language across generations. While Neanderthals also carried a version of FOXP2, recent studies suggest subtle differences in expression and regulation. Theirs may not have triggered the same neurological pathways that ours did. It's not just the presence of the gene but how the brain interprets it that made the difference. FOXP2 is not the full story. Language is a symphony of biology, environment, and culture. But without this molecular switch, the music may have never started. It is in many ways the key that unlocked the human mind and opened the door to everything that came after. 40,000 years ago, Europe lay beneath a frozen sky. Glaciers carved the land, temperatures plummeted, and survival was not a given, was a daily test. In this harsh, unforgiving world, Homo sapiens began to spread northward from warmer regions, equipped not just with tools, but with something far more powerful: language. With speech came the ability to share information across time and space. They could describe the migration patterns of mammoths, the locations of hidden springs, or the warning signs of a coming storm. They could teach the young, organize group hunts, pass along herbal knowledge, and weave memory into narrative. Around the fire, plans became words, and words became action. By contrast, Neanderthals, though physically adapted to the cold, likely lacked this full communicative capacity. Their knowledge may have died with the individual, passed only through imitation rather than explanation. Without a flexible system of abstract symbols language, they were left to rely on instinct and repetition, not foresight or innovation. In an age where every mistake could be fatal, the ability to warn, coordinate, and remember became a tool sharper than any blade. Speech wasn't just for expression, it was for survival. And in the silence that followed the last Neanderthal footsteps, the voice of Homo sapiens continued forward, echoing across the ice. In the dark silence of prehistoric caves, bones speak not with sound, but with meaning. A notch carved into antler, a pattern scratched onto stone. These were not random marks. They were message-serially attempts to track time, mark seasons, perhaps even remember the dead. In places like Chauvet and Lascaux, thousands of years before writing, modern humans painted not just animals but ideas, motion, fertility, fear, reverence. Images born of imagination, not merely observation. These were not survival tools. They were symbol sand. They changed everything. With symbolism came the ability to compress knowledge, to store it beyond the body. A line drawn by one hand could echo for generations, passing on experience without a word. These weren't just picturesque, they were lessons, rituals, memories preserved in pigment and shadow. Neanderthals left behind finely crafted tools, evidence of care, of adaptation, but rarely symbols. No myths etched into walls, no clear signs of metaphor or memory passed forward. Their world was tactile, ours became conceptual. This shift from tool to symbol, from doing to dreaming, was the true evolutionary divide. Because when humans learned to make marks that outlived them, we stepped beyond mere survival. We entered culture, and in that act, we changed what it meant to be human. The moment we began to speak was the moment we began to remember not just facts, but feelings, dreams, and fears. With words came ritual, and with rhythm came music. Long before writing, we were already singing. In caves echoing with firelight, flutes carved from vulture bone carried melodies into the dark. Necklaces made of animal teeth and colored beads weren't just decoration, they were symbols. tokens of identity, of connection, of meaning beyond the physical. We didn't just survive the Ice Age, we reflected on it. Language allowed us to mourn the dead, to comfort the living, to pass on stories of how the world came to be. A spoken phrase could capture grief. A chant could stir courage. A myth could keep a culture alive through long winters. Through language, we transformed instinct into intention and memory into legacy. We imagined gods in the sky, spirits in the forest, and patterns in the stars. We asked questions no other creature dared. Why are we here? What comes after death? The Neanderthals may have lived beside us, but this capacity to turn sound into symbol and symbol into story marked the moment we became something new, not just another species of primate, but human creatures who sang to the unknown and remembered their dead not with silence, but with song. Some 30,000 years ago, the last known Neanderthal vanished from the fossil record. No great battle was recorded, no final stand in a mountain pass, no extinction carved into stone, just silence, just absence. They faded like a breath on a cold morning, gradually, invisibly, irreversibly. Perhaps some interbred with Homo sapiens, their legacy living quietly in our genes today. A curve of the brow, a twist in the immune system, a fragment of bone memory passed down. But their culture, their way of life, was gone. It's possible they were outcompeted, not through violence, but through organization. The sapiens had language, networks, rituals. They could coordinate across distances and generations. The Neanderthals, isolated and less adaptable, may have found themselves slowly pushed to the margin zone valley at a time, one winter at a time. Or perhaps they simply gave up. Their numbers dwindled, births slowed, the old ways no longer worked in a changing world. And so, with no enemy at the gate, they disappeared. No war, no conquest, only the snow and the silence that followed. Their final crossing wasn't over a battlefield, but into memory, into our bones, into the haunting truth that even the strongest can be lost if they cannot adapt or speak or be remembered. Genetic evolution shaped the structure of our bones, the function of our organs, the resilience of our skin. It took billions of years to mold the human form. But once we discovered language, transformation no longer needed eons. It took mere millennia. Words became our second inheritance C-note carved into chromosomes, but carried on breath and memory. Unlike DNA, language isn't passed through blood. It's passed through stories, through whispered warnings, through lullabies sung beside the fire. It allowed ideas to survive longer than bodies, and experiences to stretch beyond a single lifetime. Through language, we built culture, technology, and civilization brick by spoken brick. But this gift came with a shadow. The same tongue that recites poetry can also twist truth. With speech came propaganda, manipulation, and division. We learned not only how to communicate, but how to deceive. And as our ability to influence expanded, so did our power to destroy from within. Language, then, is a double-edged tool. It raised us above the silence of the past, but it can also drown us in noise. If we do not use it with care, the very thing that lifted us above the Neanderthals may become the thing that brings us down. Wisdom, not just words, must guide our breath. Today, with language alone, we orbit planets, redraw borders, and reshape ecosystems. Words ignite wars. Words heal nations. With voice, we build the scaffolding of civilization. But for all our power, we are not immune to the same fate that silenced the Neanderthals. They too were once masters of their world adapted, clever, enduring, and yet their voices faded. Their tools turned to dust. All that remains are fragments bones beneath stone silent artifacts in frozen caves, echoes of a lost humanity that could not carry its memory forward. We now stand at a similar edge not of ice, but of consequence. Our voice has become global, but its weight has never been heavier. In a world of instant communication, we risk forgetting the gravity of what it means to speak to, remember, to teach, to shape the world through breath and meaning. So we ask again, will this voice that once saved us from extinction now become the very force that unravels us? Or will we learn from those who came before, from those who vanished in silence? Because in the end, language is legacy. It will carry us forwarder, become the last sound etched into the bones of a vanished world. At Prehistoric Shadows, we don't just study bones, we listen to the silences between them. To the lives once lived, the questions left unanswered, the meanings that fossils can still whisper if we know how to hear. The story of Homo Sapiens and Neanderthals isn't merely about who survived and who didn't. It's a mirror reflecting what it means to be humaner, voice, our memory, our power to choose what endures. If this journey made you reflect, don't let it fade. Subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows, because every fossil holds a voice, and it's time we listened.